All right. Well, I think we're live. Well, hello everybody. Whether you're watching us live or you're watching this recording, right off the bat, I do want to say this is Fuse's first Substack live. So if Charles and I run into any kind of technical snafus today, we appreciate your patience and understanding in advance. But again, just want to thank you for the time you're giving us today, or if you're watching this recording. And interested to learn more about our work here at UT Austin and in the fellowship using the science of engagement in particular. Um, really appreciate whether you're giving up part of your summer or your Friday to spend that time with us. We do these sessions roughly once a month during the school year, informal, more just a conversation, about some of our practices. We have different guests at different times. Today, we're going to be jumping into one of the practices that teachers in our fellowship engage with over the summer typically. It's called the culture of learning speech. We're joined by Charles House, who's one of our facilitators. I'm going to introduce him in a moment after I just give a brief background on our program. If you're watching and you are unfamiliar with Fuse, I just want to show you exactly what it is, how you can get involved with us, our work, maybe sign yourself up, maybe sign your teachers up. We've got a few different ways for you to engage with us. But we'll get started with that. And then Charles and I will have a conversation about the speech practice, things he's seen, things I've seen over the course of the last several years, working with teachers all around Texas, the United States, and outside the US as well. So I'm going to share my screen real briefly. Again, today's not a presentation, but I do want to give you a brief background on what our fellowship is here at UT Austin. So we are the fellowship using the science of engagement. It's mainly for secondary STEM teachers, 6th grade through 12th grade, but we do have some others, that join as well. And really what we are is we're a team, a blended team of researchers, practitioners, teachers, folks like myself, Ryan Smith, and I introduced myself earlier, but I'm the director of the fellowship. Most of my career I spent as either a campus and district level leader in a mid-size suburban district here in Texas. But we're very much a blended team that is taking the latest research on adolescent development, adolescent motivation, and blending it with teacher practices around communication, how we frame our beliefs around mistakes, exams, the learning culture that we're looking to create with the latest science of adolescent development. Now, young people are driven by the need for status and respect. That is a natural thing and something we should be excited about during puberty, actually, and ways we can take advantage of that in specifically math classrooms, but other classrooms as well. So students have an environment where they feel comfortable taking chances, taking risks, and they believe that their teacher respects them enough to create a safe place for them to take those chances. So today we're going to talk about one practice, the culture of learning speech. We always tap into the best way to show respect for our students is to have high standards, but to match that with high support. And also, before we go on, always want to thank our partners at the National Science Foundation. They back our work here at the fellowship and the institute, and they are excited about the things we're doing and support that work going forward. A little background on kind of the origin of our fellowship. Dr. David Yeager, author of 10 to 25, he's our lead Fuse scientific director here at UT Austin. He has spent decades now working with young people, with teachers, coaches, professors, others to better understand adolescent development and how we can shape our language as adults, as coaches, as teachers, to tap into a young person's innate drive for that status and respect to improve engagement in whatever scenario that we're trying to work with young people. Dr. Carol Dweck out of Stanford, author of Mindset. Her and Dr. Yeager have been close collaborators again for a couple decades, all the way back to when Dr. Yeager was one of her lead grad students at Stanford. She and David were the key developers of the practices that we do in Fuse, and she is a key member of our team as well. And then the Dana Center here at UT, he's retired now, but the founder, Dr. Uri Treisman, works closely with David and Dr. Dweck to help us take the latest science and research around adolescent development and make sure that it is finely tuned to work, in a rigorous math classroom, whether that rigorous math classroom is a 6th grade classroom or a college calculus class like he taught. It's the same ideas, same culture building practices that make it an environment where students of all different levels can feel like they're being pushed to their limit, but also that that level of support matches that expectation that we have for them. And then finally, On-Ramps is a dual credit enrollment program here at UT, and they have a lot of expertise in instructional delivery. And we identified the top performing on-ramps teachers from around Texas, those teachers that were outperforming their peers on AP exams, things like that, brought them into UT, worked with them over the course of a couple weeks to help develop these practices as well. So that's kind of our background, our origin story, real quick. If you're thinking about joining the fellowship or working with us in any way, we can go into more detail on how all these different elements play together. A little bit of our data from the last couple of years. We're always measuring everything we do in our fellowship. We're seeing higher math scores of students who are in our fellowship at a 15% increase. Really excited about that 50% reduction in Fuse math teachers reporting feeling burnt out or wanting to quit. As our students are more engaged with us, the more value we feel as teachers, the more engaged we are in the profession and wanting to stay with it. Students in our Fuse classrooms are 10% more likely to report that they feel respected and they have a lower level of anxiety in their math classroom. And then a 25% reduction in teachers' fixed mindset. And that's with over time within the fellowship. So because we are a fellowship program, we work with folks over the course of a year most of the time. The work that we do is meant to not just be a one-time experience, but to blend in throughout the course of a year and hopefully beyond as well. And as you can see, Ms. Yandel from Tolosa Midway here in Texas, I always like to share her quote, that really felt like what she did with us was accessible. What we talk about is not like changing the entire way that you teach math. It's not a new math curriculum. It's not a new science curriculum. It's really about, how do you structure your language around certain key points in a classroom to be more effective and create a more engaging environment for adolescents. It's all based on kind of this adolescent predicament. We've got other webinars on our Substack to go into a lot more detail on the science, but I wanted to open up today with just really showing kind of this piece of what's happening with young people is what drives a lot of our work. So we know that in this adolescent phase, and for everybody it starts a little different, but typically it's on the younger end, around 10 years old, and on the upper end, early 20s. That's the time of life where we are, biologically tuned to be seeking status and respect. It's where we are, first deciding like, who are we going to be? How are we going to contribute? What's our identity going to look like? And that spikes, as puberty hits, as testosterone, starts growing in everybody, is we're seeking that out. It's not okay to be a 17-year-old and feel like society is only taking care of you, that you're not contributing in some way. But at that same time, that rise in testosterone, that change that we have, is also creating a time in life where we're constantly questioning, how am I perceived? What does my teacher really think about me? What do my peers think about me? What do my parents, my caretakers, my coaches, how do they view me, as a valuable member, of this group that I'm in? How am I feeling? Am I feeling respected by them? Are they treating me, as somebody that is providing value, providing worth? So we're constantly questioning that as teenagers at the same time when we are seeking it out more than ever. And we call that respect gap, or that's kind of that adolescent predicament, in our young people, that these two things are happening at the same time. And too often, as adults, we feel like, well, let's just put the kids in the closet, or in a sheltered room while they're in puberty, and then bring them back out when they're through it. We believe that is the exact opposite way we should be thinking about it, specifically in a rigorous classroom, that this is the time in their life when they are more willing to take a risk, more willing to take a chance, more willing, hopefully, to raise their hand and ask for help or answer a question in front of their peers. But if we're not speaking to them in a way that taps into that need for status and respect, and maybe inadvertently speaking in a way that is critical, of the respect that they might be having, oftentimes inadvertently, but it'll just reinforce that questioning that they have of, am I somebody that's respected? Am I somebody that's providing value? So very critical time that we have. That's why we're going to be talking about this speech. I'm here with Charles in a moment. Here's the main idea, of like our beliefs and how do you motivate and influence young people, is that we know that young people have less power and are attuned to status and respect, like I just mentioned, more so than established adults, like teachers, parents, or coaches. Once we've hit that age in our lives, so we're kind of established, we are no longer in that pubertal development zone. Maybe a setback or a perceived slight by somebody doesn't have that same long-lasting impact that it does on a young person who is still in that zone of life. So we might brush something aside, or we might not think it's that big a deal, something we say, but to that young person, it is reinforcing a view that they've already created of themselves potentially. So when adults threaten that status and respect, they lose motivation. But when we honor that status and respect, we can capture that motivation and keep that level of rigor high. We call that the mentor mindset. That's a big piece of Dr. Yeager's book and our work throughout the fellowship. Mentor mindset essentially is the best way to show young people respect is to have high expectations, set those high standards. But the only way we're going to be successful is if, and they're going to be successful, is if the level of support that they feel is happening in that moment matches that high level of rigor. So that is the mentor mindset. Real briefly, over the course of the fellowship, teachers engage with 10 different practices. They're all around mindset development, memory retrieval, building a culture of learning in a classroom, and aligning three key things: our beliefs and values, the policies and procedures that we have in our course, and the language and communication we're choosing to communicate these things. So we're always talking about alignment. That's part of the speech too that Charles and I will talk about, is that if our policies show one thing and we're saying something else, or our actions show one thing but we're saying something else, then our young people are going to see that hypocrisy, and that's going to disengage them. So 10 practices. You go onto our Substack, we've got several webinars around a couple of these different practices. Today we're going to be talking about culture of learning speech here shortly. Real quickly, how the fellowship is broken down for teachers. So they start in the summer, and we usually have a few different ways for them to launch with us. It's a 2.5-day hybrid institute. Sometimes we do it here live in Austin. Sometimes it's online, kind of depending on the year. Then during the year, they attend 2 full-day sessions, virtual learning institutes, one in October, one in February. There's 4 coaching sessions along the way. And then their students in their class also do 3 student engagement interventions throughout the year as well. They earn $1,000 when their districts sign them up. And then we also do executive leadership series sessions throughout the year as well. And my last slide here before Charles and I jump into it are just some other ways. I know we have some other folks who are joining the call today or watching the video. Along with the full fellowship, we also do other types of services, different ways that we interact with campuses or organizations. It could be, 1 to 2 day workshops, could be spread out over the course of a year, focused on just different elements of our curriculum, not necessarily the entire fellowship. So if what you hear today resonates and you'd like to talk more about that, love for you to reach out. We also have our student engagement modules that some campuses really just engage with those because they want to focus on helping their students better understand how they can reframe stress, think about their own mindset and identity development when it comes to them as a learner. And we focus more on the student piece. And then we're launching online courses next spring. So there's a place on our website to join that wait list so you could engage with that as well. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And before we jump into it with Charles, if anybody has any questions along the way, anything you want to chime in with or ask, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on those with us today. But Charles House, he is one of our wonderful Fuse facilitators. So during the course of the fellowship and our workshops, we have facilitators on our team who either are currently or were recently math teachers. So they're the ones really delivering the learning for everybody throughout. And I asked Charles to join us here today because over the last several years, he has been our lead facilitator on the culture of learning speech practice. And I want to get his insights, get his thoughts. We'll go over like what's part of a good speech, things you could take away and probably try out, as your school year is coming up. But before we jump in, Charles, just take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself and how excited you are to be on our first Substack Live here to talk to everybody.
Yeah, this is groundbreaking for Fuse in our first Substack Live. So I'm excited and a little bit nervous. Make sure we're setting the tone appropriately. But yeah, like Ryan said, I've been with the program for the past couple of years, operating as one of the lead facilitators, along with Christian and Sergio. And I can honestly say, like in the 10 years that I was a teacher, that last year when became a Fuse fellow, it was probably the most rewarding for me because it gave me a sense of freedom that I think I always wanted as a teacher. And then it just kind of with the science that Ryan was referring to, it kind of gave me the evidence to go and go be more more free in my classroom. And so I was able to kind of engage my students in a different way, um, for both their benefit and mine. Like I think that's a big thing that a lot of teachers see out of the fellowship is not only the student benefits, but the benefits that they see as educators. Throughout their practices in classroom and even their morale. Like it's they're more excited about the classroom and the profession as well. So yeah, it's been a great, 4 or 5 years here with Fuse, and I'm excited to see where we go, over the next 5 to 10. So
Yeah. Well, thanks, Charles. And talking about the speech today, before we jump into some of the particulars, like I mentioned, you've been talking about and thinking about this speech practice, for a couple of years now. Just like what every teacher like opens their class. Maybe you talk about the syllabus, maybe you talk about policies, like just in general. Like how do you see this approach to starting a school year maybe differently than maybe what you might have done before thinking about this?
yeah, I mean, and that's how I try to approach the practice of the speech in itself. And the term speech is kind of misleading, because I think some of the apprehension when they hear coach of learning speech is they're going to be developing this writing tool that they're going to have to get up and say verbatim in front of their students. But what the speech allows you to do, it just allows you to set the foundation for the entire year. So then now you have the opportunity for your students and for yourself to have those actions and the intentionality behind it, which is one of the things that we stress, to reinforce the message that you have within your speech. So, like as they created and as they revisited throughout the year, there'll be instances that we tell them, like, hey, whenever you have your first big assessment or your first big major event, go back to this portion of your speech and reiterate, how you feel about these metrics throughout your classroom. And I think it allows the teachers and the students just to kind of feel that sense of community building throughout the year. And then one of the things that we talk about is like it erases a lot of the ambiguity, a lot of the anxiety, especially for students coming in that have past experiences, and especially in math, is they aren't sure what to expect from this particular teacher compared to teachers in the past or experiences in the past. So if you can kind of eliminate some of that anxiety, like, oh, what's going to happen the first time I don't do well on the test, or what's going to happen when I have a question, like, what support look like? I don't want to be embarrassed. Reiterating what you were saying about the power and respect. There's a dynamic there that everybody's trying to navigate, so the speech helps you as an educator or us as educators to kind of set that foundation. And then it gives the students and the educator a roadmap throughout the year to how to revisit those things and make sure that, they're all reinforced appropriately. So
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of the key points. Like what does it mean in my class to make a mistake? What is it? How do I, as the teacher, view somebody that takes that chance to try something and maybe get it wrong
mhm.
publicly in
Yeah.
front of their peers, or how do I view grades on an assessment?
Mhm.
I know typically that's not maybe something that you would open with, in a first day.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about like what are some of those things that, in particular, our view is it's so important to just be transparent, like from day one, and tell
Yeah.
and tell your students.
That's a great one. Like here in Texas, we have, the academic star testing every year, and it's kind of a big thing, especially, eighth grade, freshman year, going into high school. Like students get a lot of anxiety around that testing event. And so, rightfully so, I think the messaging behind it in the years past is like, it's a make or break, opportunity for students where if you don't pass it, then you're not promoted to the next grade. And I think the messaging behind it and, me allowing myself to be more transparent about, the testing event and even benchmark tests throughout the year, it really greatly reduced the students' anxiety. So, kind of one of the first things that I talk about, if not on the first day, within that first week, as part of my speech and kind of establishing the culture of my classroom, is addressing the elephant in the room. Like, hey, this is a star year. It's a really big deal for you. But at the same time, I don't want us to stress just that end of year event. Like if we show up every day, if we're supporting each other, if we're working hard, star is going to take care of itself. And you kind of frame it in that way. Like we're going to break that test up in the metrics that you're going to be tested on throughout the year, every unit, every homework assignment, every, quiz or test. So we'll know along the way where we need reinforcements and, how, you need support to be better. So again, like the speech allows this teacher and the student to have that open line of communication and a more honest and transparent conversation to help reduce that gap. Because I think in that, pre-adolescent, adolescent stage, like you said, like they are trying to find where they fit, with respect to the power and respect in the dynamic. So the more you can give them the autonomy to make the decisions or to feel like they're part of the process, I think the easier it'll be on all parties involved. So I don't shy away from having the conversation. Like you said, like it's more, hey, we're all stressing it. We all know, that it's there. Let's just address it head on. And then anytime you have those anxieties, anytime you want to have that conversation, we can always revisit it. It doesn't have to be a one-time thing, but I do try to make sure like, hey, it's there. Let's not shy away from it.
When we first teach the speech practice in our institutes, we talk about aligning to these three kind of key elements, of a speech. It's how are you communicating your beliefs and values?
Mhm,
How is the way you're communicating those aligned or misaligned to your policies and practices
mhm,
in your classroom? And then, what is the language and communication that you're using? So I'm curious that to me, what I see oftentimes is the misalignment between how you communicate beliefs and values and then your policies and practices.
mhm.
And students could typically see, right through that.
Yeah.
So can you just go a little deeper into, so those that are watching that maybe won't have a chance to do the practice. We're going to put a sample speech in the notes for everybody, but really just oftentimes teachers don't think about how, like, do I need to communicate my beliefs and values? Like, we're here to learn math.
Mhm.
Isn't it obvious? There's that idea that, well, my students, they're in ninth grade, they've been in math classes since, kindergarten. So they
Right.
know kind of what this is about. But talk a little bit about the importance of that beliefs and values piece and looking for alignment.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like all the you want all your students to be successful, and like I think that's an assumption that we take for granted as an educator, regardless of what subject. I think you you have to be very intentional about how you communicate either A, what success looks like for your students, and B, what those beliefs are for everybody. So even if they don't believe it in the beginning or at the time, like you set that foundation, and then like you're saying, your beliefs and values will then be reinforced by your policies and procedures. So on the first day, if I say, hey, I'm excited for all you guys to be here. I think we're gonna do great things, and I'm gonna be here to support you along the way. Well, throughout the year and throughout my lessons and throughout my interactions with the students, I need to make sure that my policies, routines, conversations, interactions, whether they be formally in the classroom or even outside in passing period, like all those times, my actions have to align. So if I'm saying, "Hey, I think homework's really important. You need to do it as far as practice," but then if a student comes in class and they have questions or they didn't have an opportunity to finish homework, if I'm not proactively creating a space for them to still continue to get the support, then it's a misalignment on how important I think homework is, right? So it allows me to be more flexible in how I'm establishing the policies and routines, but it also allows the students to check those boxes of like evidence. Like he said that he was going to support me. Well, here I need support for homework, and he did what he was supposed to do, and just getting those little pieces of evidence throughout the year, like kind of little breadcrumbs. It'll help increase their motivation, increase their confidence. So then they'll start adopting those policies and routines on their own, which is one of the biggest things that I see, and especially in our fellows, whenever that light switches on for their students, where now the students are initiating, the conversations, and the students are initiating the interactions based on how the teacher has established it. So in that first part, of your class, establishing the triangle, the beliefs and values, policies and routines, and then aligning your language and communication with it. All of it plays, an equal and important part in establishing your classroom culture.
Yeah, it's just like taking advantage of this, like one of the unique things about schools, right, is like you keep having these fresh starts. Like
Mhm.
in a regular job, regular work, maybe you have quarters or something, but you don't have like this new launch that happens every August.
Yeah.
And how important it is to take advantage of that opportunity. Like you've got a new fresh start to build, and it's all about building trust,
Mhm.
right? It's like if you were joining a new organization or a new school as a teacher, like you're immediately making judgment calls, like on those first couple days. Like, this is my principal. Are they really? Do they mean what they're saying? Do they like what's ambiguous? Like what's not aligned maybe with what I've heard, about the culture. So you have this unique opportunity to not just talk about your policies of like where to turn in your homework,
Yeah.
but to on one hand, chip away maybe at some of the scar tissue that's been built up in some students about math, but then also to convince them to give you a shot, you
Mhm.
know. And then if you're saying something that's hypocritical and they see that, 2 weeks down the line, then you've lost all that trust that you built up.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we when we look at the research behind like why we kind of end our summer with this practice and ask teachers to launch their year with it is oftentimes as adults we assume that students can interpret our actions,
Mhm.
and they know that like, well, of course I want everybody to be successful. Of course I believe that making a mistake in my class is a valuable addition to the learning of everybody.
Yep.
But those assumptions, with a teenager in particular who maybe is already coming in with like a negative past, with their teachers. So we very much, try to flip that and say it's a tell and show approach. Like you have to be transparent and tell them exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your beliefs are, to call you out. If you do something inadvertently hypocritical.
Mhm.
Some of that original research, that we did came around some studies we did with school resource officers, and how one group of SROs, those are school police officers here in Texas, who would make their rounds and they would use a lot of transparency statements with students. They'd be walking the halls or during a lunch period and say, I'm the reason that I do this every day is because I want to get to know you better. Of course, I want to make sure everybody's safe, but I also want you to know who I am, know that I'm somebody, a resource for you. And then another group who would just make the rounds. You know, both groups had the same intention, but one group used transparency statements. Another group just made assumptions that students would know why they were doing what they were doing. And then interviewing students afterwards, of course, the SROs who use those transparency statements talked to the students about why they were doing what they're doing, told them before they showed them, had much better relationships, much better interpretations of the young people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point because, like, even in that situation, as an SRO, like you said, those are school resource officers. They're often, in uniform, so they're, like, they're essentially police officers in the school. And whatever your experience may or may be with law enforcement, like, just the mere sight of that is going to invoke some type of emotion, some type of past experience. So, for them to say, have those transparency statements and say, "Hey, here's why I'm here," and then having the actions behind it to reinforce it, like you talked earlier about scar tissue, those interactions then help build that confidence and help build that trust between those two people. The same thing in the classroom. Like a lot of times, and one of the most surprising things is like I don't think we give enough credit to the assumption of what we're saying and how they may have a negative connotation depending on who the listener is. So if I may say, um, I call on students because I value your learning. But if I'm not transparent about that, they may think, oh, they're calling on me because they want to embarrass me in front of all of my friends, or they're
Yeah.
singling me out. And it's like, no, that's not it. I value your learning in this classroom. I want to make sure everybody's having, it's being able to clear the air, like you said, about with those transparency statements, so, or even like how they're offering me tutoring because they think I'm dumb. It's like, no, I'm offering tutoring as a way of support. So yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways is what we try to stress, especially in the speech and the language of communication, is being intentional and being transparent and being authentic. Like all three of those things are really big because it's easier for you to show up every day as yourself as an educator. And once the students can see, you're genuine, then they start showing up in the same way. So yeah, that's one of the big ones there.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like compare teachers to police officers, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is an authority figure position.
Right.
It's the same thing with a coach, same thing with anybody. When we don't know, you got to most secondary teachers have 120 to 150 new students every year. And you have no idea what their experiences have been like. What their relationships with their past teachers, have been like.
Mhm.
And when we as the adults, enter into that new relationship with 150 people, with some assumptions, and we're going to miss a lot of the nuance, that most of our students are bringing based on their past
Yeah.
experiences. So I know when we talk to teachers about it, oftentimes it seems, like, what you want me to give a speech? Like I'm not a speech giver. Like I already talk to my kids, I already have good relationships with them. But there's always like a light bulb, that comes on a little bit when it's like thinking through like how can I do. To me, it's do two things. It's like where in my normal delivery are there signs of ambiguity or things that can be misinterpreted,
Mhm.
and then also where are there where is there misalignment between my policies and practices and what I say, what I
Mhm.
preach. And oftentimes we don't take the time, to really think about that, especially when we talk about grading policies and homework policies, whatever that might be. When we say, you know, um, everything is formative, and learning is a journey. And then maybe I've got a homework policy where you can't turn in something after 2 days, or whatever that might be. And there's always maybe you do need to have that practice, in your class for whatever reason. But we would suggest, I think, naming that in the beginning and say, like, I recognize, that this is a practice, that we have. This is a reason that I have to do it.
Mhm.
But that doesn't change my overall belief,
Mhm.
but leaving that unsaid, is just going to reinforce what might already be a negative
Yeah,
assumption,
yeah. Leaving it up to
that's
assumption.
happening.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious too. So you've part of your role, is you teach the practice. The fellows in our program, they write their speech. They get some feedback from peers. You get a chance to look at a lot of the speeches too when they turn in kind of an updated draft. You get to talk to some of them about them. Like, what are some pieces or some common questions that you get about this whole idea of giving a speech? What are some elements maybe that we could go a little deeper with?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception, the first thing that worries a lot of educators is like just the enormity of it and the word speech itself. Like when you think about a speech, you think about it being a duration or a certain number of words, and you have to be in front of everybody, and you're formally saying these words like it's rehearsed. And I think and the biggest misconception that I address is that the speech itself is more of like a framework or an outline of, again, how you want your classroom culture to exist and how you want it to operate. So there are certain parts of the speech that we emphasize that you address, but in a way that you can revisit the speech itself, quote unquote speech, throughout the year in a natural tone and a natural conversation. So when you have your first big testing event or when you have, students struggling, we don't want you to actually pull out the speech and like read it or pull it up for the students to read it. But it's like, hey, remember when we talked about at the beginning of the class, when was establishing the culture and I told you that I think you could be successful in this class and I told you I'd be here to support you. Well, this is one of those opportunities right now where you may not feel confident in what we're doing and what we're learning. I'm here for you. So what does that look like? I'll be here, and then you just kind of explain it like over the top with your intentionality. It's what I try to stress. Like you just previously stated, like if you leave it up to assumption, then 9 times out of 10, they're gonna assume the worst. And so instead of creating that environment, just say, hey, here's what I'm saying, here's exactly what I mean by that. And if you have any either questions or concerns about that, then let's have a conversation to either even create a even better environment if that doesn't work for you. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. The other one is just like trying to get it right the very first time. And I find it ironic because a lot of what we know the adolescents are going through in their teachers' classrooms because not only the science is saying it, but the evidence that we've now collected over these past few years about what they're experiencing as their teachers are going through it. It's the same exact thing that the teachers are experiencing as they're trying to develop this speech, right? And so you're kind of addressing the elephant in the room with them at the same time that they'd be addressing with their students. And that's like, hey, do you see how you feel right now? Like the anxiety that you're going through? Like now imagine that as, a 13-year-old in your classroom with no experience in your subject, having all these other prior experiences coming into your classroom and trying to understand where they fit in and how they can be successful. So that in itself is again, it's I don't necessarily say like what they get wrong, but it's more of a reprogramming. Like we're reprogramming the teachers so they can help reprogram, the students. I think all teachers care and not all teachers are committed, to their students. And so it's more just like helping them be more intentional about the inherent assumptions that they may or may not be dealing with. So I think those two are the biggest ones. And then once we kind of establish that, then it's just more about individually, like, how do you want to come across? Like there's this idea that, like you said, as an authority figure, there's supposed to be like this veil between us and students. Like they can't see my personality, they can't see who I am as a person. And like, and there is a line with respect, to your profession and the relationship that you have. But I think also there on the other side is that there is a level of commitment that I have to my students that allows me to be transparent about when I'm having a good day or when I'm having a bad day, or what my experiences were when I was in their shoes, or how I see them that they can't see themselves yet. Because at this age, it's very short-sighted for a lot of our students. So helping kind of establish that broader picture and helping them see, the forest and not just the trees right in front of their eyes.
And
It
I was gonna say it's authenticity,
Yeah.
too. It's because we have hundreds of teachers, we've got facilitators with different personalities, and trying to be something you're not, students are gonna see right through that.
Yeah.
And it's not about entertainment, it's not about um, being somebody that students want to hang out with. It's about them having a predictable environment where they believe, that you have status and you hold them in high status and respect them, and being clear about what respect looks like in our class, and then being consistent with that.
Yeah.
And you have to. I've got two teenagers. My own Charles is going to have teenagers soon. His are still younger, I believe.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I could say, is that um, like the relationships grow so much better when, as the adult, you know, you're whether it's up and down or whether it's kind of steady and even. If you're predictable, like if the young people like know who you are, what to expect from you, what you value, and what you're going to choose to praise in your class. That's something we talk a lot with teachers about too. Is like that first couple days, when some student takes a chance and makes a mistake, and everybody, and maybe they raise their hand, but everybody else in that classroom is looking at you to see how you're going to respond, how you're going to treat that student.
Yeah.
And oftentimes inadvertently we don't say anything super negative, but we also don't take advantage of that value add that student gave to the whole class, and
Mhm.
celebrate the fact that they took that chance.
Yeah.
And then all the other students are making a judgment call right then. Okay, this is a place that's going to receive some kind of validation for trying something that was a stretch.
Yeah.
So it's okay to do that in this place, and then being predictable. And I like how you talked about, it's not just the beginning of the year. The beginning of the year is a unique opportunity because it's fresh. It's a new group of students. Everybody's making new judgment calls, like as I mentioned. But then also thinking through, like, especially if you've been teaching for a few years, like where there's ebbs and flows in engagement.
Mhm.
It could be around a certain unit, certain concept, could be a time of year, could be whatever it is on your campus or with your organization. But then planning out in advance, okay, here's the time when I know I'm going to have to revisit, some of these pieces.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, I know we talk to teachers about thinking through a full year, so it's not just a first day speech, it's almost a messaging plan, for a year. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
About the
Or just
longevity.
the idea, yeah, the idea that it's a messaging plan, it's a communication plan,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, so, like, I think to and in addressing that, I'm gonna, address what you said about authenticity. Like, I think with
Mhm.
the especially for me in my experience, like, I'm 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 a high energy guy, and it doesn't always translate for everybody. Like you said, in that last year in the classroom, I had 185 students across, 7 class periods. And so trying to manage 185 different personalities every day, and we're all trying to achieve the same goal. It's difficult. So my consistency, and like you said, like my authenticity has to show at a rate and on a level that they know what to expect regardless of whether I'm having a bad day or not. And those things are honest and transparent too. Like there'll be time like I was transparent about, hey, I locked my keys in my car this morning. I am not having a bad day. I'm not having a good day. Coffee spilled everywhere, but we're gonna get through it regardless, right? So showing them kind of an authentic side, of me being a human, right? Like I have bad days too. This is not a place where I'm like, leave your feelings at the door because we're here to learn. Like that's unrealistic. But I think that helps. So now to answer your question, I think that helps the longevity of what you're doing with the speech. When you can be authentic with your students, when you can show up and just it 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 is a part of who you are and not a part of, like you said, like a role you're trying to play, right? Like I'm showing up like this is who Mr. House is. This is not the teacher that I'm trying to portray in front of you. Like this is who I am. Regardless of how you respond or whatever we have to tackle in front of us. And so being able to see it in that light, like if on a random Tuesday, if you show up and you're reinforcing a subject that you think they all should understand and they don't, well, how are you gonna represent, or how are you gonna show up with your language of communication, your policies and procedures? What does that look like? And I think if you as they take it in that sense, right? It's not like a one time or multiple time event throughout the year, but it's every day I'm building this speech. Every day I'm building this culture. I think again, it makes it easier because then now you find the opportunities to reinforce those behaviors that you want to see. You find the opportunities to reinforce the language that you want to have with your students. And then each one of those, like I said, each one of those little breadcrumbs, just and another piece of evidence you can add to your basket for the long term.
Yeah, and just to kind of round the corner here on our conversation, it's to me it's like before thinking through these things in this role with Fuse, like you especially as a teacher, like you spend so much time thinking about pedagogy,
Mhm.
creating interventions, standards that you're going to teach. Um, you don't think of, at least in my experience, had not spent a lot of time thinking about my strategic communications,
Right.
and then pairing that though with a better understanding of adolescent development and
Mhm.
what's really going on during puberty, and the opportunities that come with having a young person in your class that's just seeking status and respect,
Yeah.
and how am I going to space that out over the course of a year. So really, the speech piece wraps up a lot of the summer practices that teachers do, where we spend a good amount of time thinking through just how we talk about mistakes in general, how often they're misinterpreted. We talk about certain moments, in a classroom that are misperceived often, because we've interviewed tens of thousands of students, and like a homework assignment thing, we or let's say a homework assignment's not a good example, but maybe like why do you do warm ups?
Mhm.
So we ask the students, why does your teacher do warm ups? And most of the responses that we get, if you're not being transparent and clear about it, is, well, that's my teacher wants to have a moment to take roll, or they're in the hallway talking to their partner teacher, during that period of time.
Mhm.
So but that's then you ask the teacher and say, well, I do warm ups because I want to, get their memory going, to give you a formative assessment for myself to see how I need to adjust my lesson that day. Total misalignment between the intention, of the teacher and how the students were interpreting, that action.
Mhm.
And thinking through, like in a speech, like this, we call it a speech again, but it's a communication plan, that you need to continually go back to, of telling, not just showing, with young people, is going to bring that into alignment, create more engagement, make it more likely somebody will do their best on that warm up or whatever it might be. So you have the data and the information that you need to adjust your lesson, to intervene with different students, to know where you need to lean in more, on a reteach opportunity.
Mhm.
So any last thoughts, Charles, before we wrap up for today?
I don't this is for first, this is a great experience. There's so much to like I know we're trying to, give them a brief overview of the culture of learning speech, but it's so layered and so nuanced with all the practices, but especially the speech. Like um it's it's because representation matters, like expectations matter. And so even yourself, like as a like I right now I'm trying to tie a little bow on it because I want to who if you're watching this live or if you're watching a recording, I want you to be able to take, a gem that would either intrigue you to seek out the practice or to try some of these strategies in your classroom. Um part of the introduction to the speech is I always refer to Frida Pearson's video, her TED talk about, relationships and like, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I like the emphasis on that is really important. You have to establish kind of that relationship with the students as a whole, as a student body, and individually with each of your students before you can, really just like take off and see the results, right? Because you can have all the lip service, as we call it, as you want to, but if your actions aren't aligning, then like you said, it's just that, it's just lip service. So I think yeah, it's a great practice. What we're doing with Fuse, I think it's a great program. I in my heart of hearts, I want every student and teacher to kind of go through just the experience of using their past experiences through this new lens, this new framework, and say, "Oh, I was doing those things, but I wasn't intentional about, my language." Or as a student, like, "Oh, I was experiencing that, and I assumed that my teacher meant this when they really meant this." And it kind of opens your eyes to like a whole new experience, in whatever subject that you're experiencing. So I think for for me and for the program moving forward, I hope we continue to see success in that way. And if you're seeing this, or if you're watching this, or if you want to take something to your classrooms or to your students, I would say just be as transparent as you're comfortable with about what's happening in your classroom and in your district. And I know it there's a lot of restraint when it comes to like district policies and certain things that you have to do. But within that, I tell teachers like if there's a box for you to operate within, you're allowed to color in every corner of that box. Like don't leave a piece untouched. Use your tools to the maximum capability so you can extract the best potential out of your students and yourself. But I mean, I can go on forever. Like it's just such a like I'm just thinking about other trains of thought. But ultimately, like this is a it's it's a great experience if you get a chance to experience it. So I hope, like you said, Ryan's going to link some resources in there for you. So just take a look in there, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me here on Substack or reach out to us. Like I think Fuse is a great program, and I'm excited to see where the next couple years are for us.
Yeah, and that what you mentioned about, again, coming back to transparency statements again, and not knowing, or students not I'm going to butcher the quote, not knowing how much, caring how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
It makes me think of a teacher who was in our program the first year, um, and she had exceptional policies and practices.
Mhm.
She had everything set up. She had completely an excellent mindset and approach. But she recognized in herself that she wasn't telling the students how much she cared. She was just like leaving it up to chance that they would notice these practices that she has and this instruction that she has. And she made a concerted effort that year to kind of train herself to continuously tell their students how proud she was of them,
Mhm.
how proud she was of their ability to take a chance and maybe make a mistake, in front of their peers, to be in an accelerated math class for the first time. And it didn't come natural to her to say that for whatever reason. Like it just wasn't part of her approach. And by training herself to do that, like you force yourself to do it in the beginning. If you need to start saying something that is not natural, it's something you can do. It's a learnable skill. Like we can practice, telling people we're proud of them the same way we can practice, a new way to teach exponents.
Mhm.
And the impact that she saw throughout the year of more students engaging with her, more students coming in for tutoring, more students believing that they did belong, in that accelerated class for the first time, had huge payoffs for her. And it was just the fact that her students weren't recognizing the environment that she built through her policies and practices, but she wasn't explicitly telling them.
Yeah.
With teenagers, we got to tell them over and over and over again, especially if you only got them for 1 year.
Mhm.
So that's why it's so critical in that first um, couple weeks
Yeah.
to really lean into that. And the same thing with go ahead, go ahead.
No, even with what you're saying, like, even in that, like even something so small as like words of affirmation, like just reinforcing, like, "Hey, I'm proud of you for turning that in on time. I'm proud of you for asking that question, or thank you for your contribution." Like something so small, like you said, like it'll go a long way. And like she said, the changes that she saw throughout the year, I'm sure she a lot of teachers assume like there's this big thing that you have to do in order to get, your students to engage and to buy into it. And it's like, no, it's really just like adjusting, one or two things and being really intentional about doing it consistently, and then it'll move mountains. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So like being like explicit and transparent. Like let's say you do accept late work, all up until the end of the grading period or something, and you give students the score they received on that assignment, not like a artificially lowered 70 because it was late.
Yeah.
But if they showed 90% of knowledge, you give them a 90. If you
Yeah.
don't explicitly tell the students, well, I'm giving you this 90 because I respect you so much in the work that you did, and I value learning over a timeline, they're not going to make that jump necessarily to see that you doing this is showing a sign of respect.
Hmm.
So we've got to be explicit in saying that I set up this policy this way because I respect you as a learner, and I view learning is not fixed to a certain time. Don't leave it up to chance, especially because you want to get credit for doing something like that as the adult. And if you don't explicitly tell folks like improvements you're trying to make in yourself, a lot of times they don't notice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with that, so as Charles mentioned, we're coming up on time. I'm going to put in the notes. So if you're watching this live, we'll send out a recording along with in the notes. There's going to be a sample speech. There's going to be a couple of tips and tricks. If you want to, we really recommend, take some of this learning. Just think about, this next school year that's starting. How could I really, one, maybe do a self audit? Where might there be misalignment between what I'm saying and what my policies and practices show and how I'm saying it? And then where are there moments in my class or things that are doing that might be left up to assumption that I want to make sure my students, especially when it comes to the culture, when it comes to the academic culture and instructional decisions that you're making, that you can be more transparent in telling them. One like quick takeaway is like spiraling content. So we did some research around asking students like, why do you think your teacher? We didn't use the word spiral because most students don't know what that means. But we asked students like, why do you think your teacher brings back certain concepts that they taught you 2 weeks ago or something like that? And a lot of the students said, well, my teacher thinks I forgot, or my teacher, was just told she has to do that. But instead, if we were transparent with them and say, this is how your brain works, right? I know you learned this before. Like, I know you probably remember most of it. This is going to make it more likely that you're able to recall that information later on when we see it on an assessment. Quick statement, adds that transparency, makes it, doesn't leave it up to chance of some of your students thinking, well, what that she thinks I wasn't paying attention before, and then it shifts that into some kind of character flaw, reinforces maybe an idea that my teacher doesn't respect me when that was never the intention in
Never.
the beginning, which is some more transparency.
Yep.
So if you haven't followed us yet on Substack, please do. This will be sent out to you with those resources. If you're interested in engaging with us, it might be a little late this summer to join the full fellowship. But I know we might have a few folks that are from different organizations or different schools. We would love to connect and either talk about teachers joining the full fellowship next year or doing some different kind of workshops and different engagements on your campus with your teachers. We can customize things to make it fit your needs.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Charles,
Thank you.
for joining us. Thank you, those that would join us live. And if you're watching this recording, hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.